what we wanted to do this week was, other than rank quarterbacks in the NFL draft, we talked about it after our podcast recording last week. This Russell Wilson situation. And I think the guys really wanted to put me on the hot seat as a Seahawks fan in the group. So what I'll do, I'll relinquish control to Henry. You guys can, act like you're Piers Morgan before he quit and drill me about Russell Wilson.
That really puts me off speaking now, to act like I'm Piers Morgan, but I will ask you a few questions, Josh.
I'll be Meghan Markle, that's fine.
Right. Okay. This is an interesting segment of the show, but so essentially, I think earlier than anyone else, Josh, you were of the belief that it was a real possibility that Russell Wilson would be traded. I think us three were thinking it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen unless you're the Texans and you manage to mess everything up spectacularly. Franchise QBs of this age and ability don't leave. It doesn't happen. But it seems like there's a lot more to it than we expected. And it seems like those concerns or the feelings that you had about Wilson leaving seem like they have a much higher chance of being true. So right now, Josh, my first question is percentage that he is the starter, game one, snap one of the 2021 regular season. What's your confidence that he'll be starting for the Seahawks?
60%, 65%. It's probably gone up slightly since then because we've had a week to kind of mellow thoughts, but I would say somewhere in that 50 to 65% range.
Okay, so still probable, but definitely you're not confident, which is interesting. Okay, what about in terms of if it does come out, it's not going to work. Seahawks are, I think your opinion is the Seahawks are getting fed up with Russ as well as the other way around. Is that similar? That's kind of what you're thinking at the moment, Josh?
Yeah. Do you mind if I jump in and just give some organizational context? Obviously, Seahawks suffered a massive Super Bowl loss at the 1 yard line, one of the most infamous recent plays. After that point, they lost a lot of the locker room. And the reason they lost most of the locker room, everyone thought Marshawn Lynch should be given the ball, as I think everyone in hindsight says should have happened. Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, multiple leaders on this team, including Cam Chancellor, who released a piece this offseason as well, all really dissuaded at that point and, lost interest, faith in the organization. And what everyone believed was the common point was that the organization, Pete Carroll in particular, had backed Russell Wilson to the point where it put Russell Wilson and his bid to be the Super Bowl MVP ahead of the team and their needs and their chance to win the Super Bowl. And so that's the context of this organization. Quite clearly they've backed Russell Wilson because Richard Sherman's no longer there. Marshawn Lynch retired and went to Oakland. And Earl Thomas left and flipped off the sidelines, right? We all know all about it. Cam Chancellor got injured, but Cam Chancellor is a different beast because, he puts the organization first in a different way. But that's the situation for this organization. Now they've got someone who, through personal changes in their life, suddenly have an external influence. Let's be honest, I think Ciara, I don't know how you pronounce her name, has had some influence there, developing a bit more of a personality for Russ. He wants to stand up for what he thinks is right. And, he's kicked out the hand that fed him even. Now this organization, they're looking at the spoiled brat of a child that doesn't appreciate everything that was given to him. And I'm a Seahawks fan, and I feel the exact same way as the organization. I love Russell Wilson, everything he's done for the organization. But you look back at the past few years, they haven't come close to repeating that, winning a Super Bowl. They've threatened, but they've never been anywhere there. So is Russell Wilson the guy? Like, what more do you change in the system? And I don't think he is. I don't think they win a Super Bowl with Russ, drastically changed since the start of the season. And if that's the case, why not cut loose? Why not get rid of the guy?
I honestly, I find it so interesting you saying this as well. Like, and if we are treating this as let's speak to Josh and find his thoughts. I've known you since uni, and you, like, one of my earliest memories of you is essentially getting me into NFL and the high praises of Russell Wilson. Like, genuinely saying to me that he was like the next best thing in the NFL. He was going to do wonders for the Seahawks. Everything. All positivity, like no downside essentially. So for you, as a Seahawks fan who had that much love for a quarterback coming into the team, had those opportunities. Obviously, like you said, the big disappointment on that Super Bowl 1 yard touchdown disappointment. How, like, what is, like, how disappointed are you in Russell Wilson now? Like, taking into consideration how high you were on him, like, is it a clear disappointment, or is it for you things have now changed and let's just start fresh and get someone new in?
I think it's mostly a frustration. I think the thing which is apparent about Russell Wilson, we've discussed it. He always talks the talk in his press conferences. Always shared responsibility. He always takes the broad shoulders and owns up to it. And yet this is a guy who this offseason has come out and said, you haven't given me enough protection. They invested in offensive line like every season for the past 8 seasons in the draft. Yeah, okay, they take random players, but that's what the Seahawks do. That's how KJ Wright, Richard Sherman, who was a converted receiver, turned into one of the top cornerbacks in the league. This isn't a team that takes an offensive line talent for an offensive line talent. They see a defensive tackle and think that guy could be a great guard. And, J.R. Sweezy is still in the league. It doesn't always work. Most of the time it won't work because you've got a mad scientist. But yeah, for me, honestly, Connor, I'm just sat here and I'm just thinking, at what point does this man own up and accept responsibility and actually step up, which I don't think he's done since that point when he was suddenly being handed the keys to the team.
For me, Josh, it's really, really surprising for you to almost use those words, spoilt brat, because I'm exactly the same boat as Connor. You, ever since we've been talking NFL together, going back over the years, you've always been a massive Russ fan, and converted myself and loads of other people, I'm sure. And for you, Josh, for you to go out and say maybe he's acting like a spoiled brat, that's tough. That's really shocking to hear. So on a personal level, do you want Russell Wilson back?
Oh, that is a good question.
Good question.
Yeah, that cuts straight to it. I'll be honest, this is one that I've been debating for probably the past 2 weeks since the sort of rumors surfaced. And probably the whole reason why my perspective is what it is I would rather see a new team built around a new quarterback than a team with Russell Wilson. Don't get me wrong. If Russell Wilson and the team work it out like most organizations do, then I'll be fully behind Russell Wilson. I'll be fully behind the Seahawks. But, as a Seahawks fan, it hasn't been the case for a long, long time that we've got to kind of consider the tantalizing opportunity of a new quarterback. Most teams, I'm sure they wouldn't wish they were in that spot, but get to look ahead each year at the draft, see which quarterback prospects are there, and they mean something to their organization. This year, I felt that for the Seahawks. So, yeah, we talked about how exciting those prospects are in the draft, and I'm really high on a lot of them. And so, yeah, part of me would definitely love to see a new quarterback in town.
Very interesting there. Yeah, so just to give a bit more context on the Seahawks, the last few years since that Super Bowl, they've made the playoffs 5 out of 6 years, but only 3 playoff wins in 6 years, with supposedly one of the best quarterbacks of the last 20 years. Invariably the Super Bowl era. When you won that Super Bowl in 2013, it would have been, how many can we get? And now we're 6 years later, and you haven't even made it close. So. All right, Josh, one step further then. Let's imagine the relationship's fractured. It's not going to happen. Whether the Seahawks think it's because his play isn't good enough or because the relationship just has been severed, even though they think he's a good player. What would you be happy with as a trade package? Do you want a pick in this draft? Do you want players? What are your thoughts? What as a Seahawks fan would you be happy with?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough question. I sat there and I thought, maybe the Dolphins would be a good trade spot, but that doesn't work without getting Tua in return. And I hate Tua. I'll be honest, I would not take Tua unless you flip him and take something with the 3rd pick, which is a legitimate spot. I quite like the prospect of Justin Fields in Seattle. I did talk about him, I'm not the highest on him out of the crop, but I think his value right now is lower than his actual NFL worth, if that makes sense, or his caliber. So Yeah, I think if you get rid of Russell, you have to have a go at a Seahawk, at a quarterback in this draft class. I think it's unacceptable not to do that and get a quick turnaround. I don't think I would be happy trading for anyone. You know, Deshaun Watson's there. I wouldn't say no to Deshaun Watson for Russell Wilson, of course. I don't think it comes down to draft picks, because I don't think the Seahawks have drafted well in the first round for a long time. So I'd sooner see them take a valuable trade asset or take a draft pick, which is specifically one of those quarterbacks, knowing there's not really a wrong choice for the top 4.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll get to see how that plays out over the next few weeks. It's going to be happening very, very shortly if the trade does happen, I imagine. I can't imagine a draft day trade for Russell Wilson, although that would be pretty epic. But yeah, maybe we'll put together a few trade packages for you, Josh, maybe next week, just to see if you'd say yes or no to them.
Yeah, that would be really good fun. I would love to see that. I actually started a new Madden franchise with the idea. Played around too much in the draft, didn't get a quarterback I wanted, and gave up. But yeah, no, I'd love to see that. Love to see that concept. I'm excited, genuinely excited to see what happens this off season. So yeah, at least you got to take the positives. But let's talk about the updates that have happened. Obviously, we just had the franchise tag deadline, so a lot of players got tagged. Before that, Chris, who usually is our COVID and injury expert, has been keeping his ear to the ground for some player updates. A few releases this afternoon. Obviously, first thing, Dak Prescott got his money. Connor, how do you feel?
Couldn't be happier. I know I branded him as being great for us previously. I absolutely love the guy. I think he's been brilliant, and his stats from last season spoke for himself before he got injured. I think all of us just had our fingers crossed that he was gonna not have a career-ending injury, because it potentially looked that way when it first happened, and you could see how much he's loved around the NFL as well. Like, players from every team coming around to wish him support and hoping that he got essentially paid, and it's finally happened for him. It's brilliant that it has, and I think really it's a move from the Cowboys to hopefully set just some strength and solidity into the offense now going into the season, without that over the shoulders of, is Dak going to stay, is Dak going to leave because we can't pay him enough. But it's finally happened, and I think it's fantastic to have him there, and yeah, let's see what next season brings with him.
Yeah, so Connor, Dak now the second highest paid player in the entire league. Only Mahomes paid more. Do you have concerns that you won't be able to retain some of your other talent when you're thinking about some young talented players that you might want to be extending in the next couple of years? Do you worry about that? And do you think that Dak will struggle if you can't surround him with that talent that you've got at the moment?
I think I don't think it'll be Dak who will necessarily be the struggle on that side of it. It might be where it impacts other areas of our team, but also at the same time, it's how, I suppose, again, it's how the cap is split, how they end up making that work. Because obviously I know that Zeke's on quite a high wage as well, but that might, again, it all depends on how they do that internally. But yeah, those two might cross paths. I believe that was what the issue was in the first place, was that Zeke obviously got paid quite highly, and then can you do the same for Dak? And he has got it, and